Welcome back. And the big breaking update that we are tracking at this hour is the Supreme Court's observations on the demand for a probe into the Pegasus reports. If we can bring to our viewers the main takeaways from the top court at the moment, the Supreme Court has said that the right to privacy needs to be discussed. The main takeaway, of course, is that now it has in fact ordered for an independent expert committee to oversee the probe into the Pegasus reports. It will be the committee will, of course, have a former Supreme Court judge as well. Let me go across to my colleague Meenakshi for the main observations which have come out and the order which has come out from the Supreme Court. Meenakshi.
Well, yes, Tanima, big judgment coming from the Supreme Court. Very, very pertinent, crucial observations being made by the three-judge bench composition, no less than the Honourable Chief Justice of India, underlining the import of right to privacy, not just for those who he says have been the victim of the Pegasus spyware, but also those who are the citizens of India. So with regards to that, we'll quickly bring our viewers up to speed by what the Supreme Court has said. It has gone ahead and said, and I quote, while surveillance is required for fighting terror, it is necessary when protecting national security. Use of it has to be evidence-based. Indiscriminate spying cannot be allowed. Procedure established by law has to be followed. Then he went on to state, and I quote, there are restrictions on right to privacy, but those restrictions have to stand constitutional scrutiny. In today's world, restriction on privacy is to prevent terrorism activities and can be imposed only when need is there to protect national security, unquote. So very, very critical observations coming in where the Supreme Court after recording the rationale and the reasoning behind its orders, went on to pass the judgment as to how it is constituting a probe committee. It went on to state, and I quote, we accept prima facie argument of petitioners, we are appointing a committee. So the Supreme Court has gone ahead and set up a three-member committee, like you rightly mentioned, which will be headed by retired Supreme Court Judge Justice Ravindran. And not just that, the Supreme Court has asked the committee to prepare a report expeditiously. The Supreme Court is still keeping the matter pending with itself, Tanima. That's the other big news. It has posted the case after 8 weeks' time. So in this interim 8 weeks, it has not just set up a committee, but it has also asked for the committee to come out with certain fact-finding results and report back to the top court in 8 weeks' time. And it has also gone ahead and said today, Tanima, very, very importantly, the Supreme Court has said that it is compelled to appoint a committee as the response of the centre on the snooping allegations was vague. So that's the other important takeaway we are highlighting for our viewers at this juncture. Three issues have emerged from this judgment, the broad contours. One, the sacrosanct nature of the right to privacy. Two, terrorism activities, they have to be obviously curtailed by the government, but it has to be done within the strict contours of constitutional permissibility. The right to privacy applies to all the citizens of this country, not just those who have been the direct victims of the Pegasus row. Furthermore, the Honourable Chief Justice of India went on to observe, and I quote, we live in an era of information. We must recognize while technology is important, it is also important to safeguard the right to privacy. Not only journalists, but also privacy is important to all citizens. The petitioners have raised issues of inaction of the centre that also reflected in this pronouncement, Tanima. Furthermore, the Supreme Court also went on to say, and I quote, our efforts to uphold rule of law without allowing us to be consumed by the political rhetoric, unquote. This court is called upon to examine the alleged abuse. So, one, the Supreme Court is saying that it has mulled over all the facts that have been presented before it, and it is passing this judgment over and above any political rhetoric that surrounds this issue. Secondly, it is underlining the need for safeguarding the right to privacy of all its citizens. Thirdly, it is saying that while terror activities have to be monitored, they have to be curbed, they have to be done within the strict confines of constitutional permissibility. And thirdly, and most importantly, it has gone ahead and set up this committee. It has kept the matter pending with itself, Tanima. That's another big news. In 8 weeks' time, the Supreme Court will take stock from this committee about the fact-finding that this committee does in the meantime. Back to you.
Right, very important observations there, an order from coming from the Supreme Court there. Let me go across to Brijesh Kalappa of the Congress, who's joining us over the phone line on this. Mr. Kalappa, your first reaction on this, and the main basis of most of these petitions, of course, was the fact that the right to privacy was being invaded, and very, very key observations have in fact been made by the top court regarding that today.
See, a private citizen has the right to conduct his business without the government snooping on them. But here it's not just a question of just an average citizen. I think it's a question of all the four organs of the state having been compromised. Judges, they have been snooped upon. Whether it's members of the executive, they have been snooped upon. Whether it's members of parliament, they have been snooped upon. Whether it's journalists, they have been snooped upon. So here is a case where all the four organs of the state have, in one form or another, they have been sought to have somehow been compromised by the fact that their conversations were not private. And it's understood that in India, at least, we don't live in a police state, and we can conduct our business. So there is a question of the government listening into the conversations and then using technology which is can only be used by governments, and where, in several other cases, it has been found that these governments have actually come up and owned up and so on and so forth. Here, the government was keeping total silence, and this compelled the government, the Supreme Court, to act against it, and has appointed this committee, and we look forward to what the committee will hold in future. And I think it will be a very important development that the committee goes into the issue as to how the software was used, against whom it was used, why was it used. You must remember that in 2019, only a few names have surfaced. Beyond 2019, which were the names which were included? So all this has to now come into the public domain.
Right. In fact, Mr. Kalappa, what we have in fact seen is that there was a lot of disruption in the parliament in the monsoon session of the parliament because of this main issue itself, as far as the opposition parties are concerned. In fact, stay with us over the phone line, Mr. Kalappa. I'm also joined by Ms. Priyanka Chaturvedi of the Shiv Sena. Ms. Chaturvedi, what we have in fact seen is, of course, very, very strong observations coming from the Supreme Court today on the right to privacy especially, and they have in fact set up an expert committee now to look into the demands of the petitions, to have a retired judge actually look into some of these aspects of actually probing into the demands which have been made in these petitions with regard to a probe into the Pegasus reports. But what we have in fact seen is that, especially in the previous monsoon session of the parliament, there had in fact been lots of questions raised by the opposition parties, which the government in fact had been strongly denying right from the beginning there, that there had been no use of the spyware. But in this particular case at the moment, what we can in fact see is that the Supreme Court has called for an expert committee to look into these demands.
The Supreme Court observations are welcome, and it's also a vindication of all that the opposition had been saying with regards to Pegasus. It was just not the point of right to privacy. It was also unconstitutional, undemocratic, where it was trying to mislead the people of this country by trying to hide what the government has been doing. The fact of the matter is that this Gujarat model of snooping was brought into the center, and they were strongly defending it. The entire logjam in the parliament on the basis of Pegasus goes to show what Supreme Court has said, that the government was deliberately spying on people, on opposition leaders, on people who have been speaking up against the government, who've been raising their voices, and it was an attempt to thwart those voices. So using spyware like Pegasus goes on to show that they were trying to undermine the democracy that the country has been enjoying ever since independence. So I think it's an indictment of the government, and I'm hoping that the investigation would reveal the true details of what all was entailed in the Pegasus matter.
That's right. In fact, Ms. Chaturvedi, what we have seen in the past is, and in the affidavit which the centre had also submitted to the top court, they had categorically denied some of these allegations which have been linked to the reports, to the Pegasus reports. They had in fact said at that time that we unequivocally deny the allegations and that they are based on conjectures and surmises or on other unsubstantiated media reports or incomplete or uncorroborated material. That had been the stand of the centre previously. But they had in fact, of course, said that if a committee, an expert panel is set up by the Supreme Court, they would be willing to submit the, any details that is required in this matter to them. So what we have in fact seen is that there has been denial of the allegations in the past. But at the moment, what we can in fact see is specifically with the right to privacy, very strong observations have come in from the top court, which has said that at least it merits to look into some of these demands and the concerns, rather, which have been raised by the petitioners.
Moving on, it should also ensure that there's a joint parliamentary committee which looks into every aspect of the snooping case. It also must be reiterated that worldwide, on the basis of these newspaper reports, we saw investigation happening in France and various other nations, and many people being indicted for actually having used Pegasus. While Israel itself, where the spyware has launched an investigation, it was only the Indian government which was running away from an investigation. So I think what Supreme Court has observed is a vindication of all that the opposition has been saying.
That's right. In fact, let me go across to Mr. I am joined over the... Thank you so much for joining us on this, Ms. Priyanka Chaturvedi of the Shiv Sena. I'm also joined in the broadcast by Mr. Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. Mr. Vasudev, thank you so much for speaking to us here on Mirror Now. Very, very key observations being made by the Supreme Court today. If you can just take us through the significance of the fact that not only has the top court set up this expert panel, but also it has in fact very clearly said that the case, they will be taking up the matter again after 8 weeks. So clearly, the Supreme Court is also going to monitor the way in which the matter actually progresses from here on, and whether or not the committee is actually able to get all the details that it can get on this particular report which is required.
The Supreme Court has done a fantastic job, because it is time that we were having an open disclosure of what Pegasus is all about. Pegasus has been misused, and that is what the Supreme Court has prima facie felt and passed this order. It is here that the liberty of the citizen has once again been protected by the Supreme Court, especially after the earlier judgments on Kumuswamy and the like. And it is time that we in governance must accept the fact that it should be a clear governance and nothing should be hidden from the citizens. What is there to hide? I am not able to understand. If a Pegasus has been used, well, let's come to a situation where it has been used. It's military software. You cannot use it in civilians and for the purposes of snooping into people, and the Supreme Court is absolutely justified in doing what it has. I would anxiously look forward to the nominations to the committee.
Right. Also, sir, we have in fact seen that the Supreme Court has said that they were compelled to appoint a committee as the response of the centre.
So, because just see the affidavits which have been filed by the government. You cannot shirk these responsibilities. You've got to maintain the rule of law in a country. And if the Supreme Court has felt so, it has felt so because it is a very peculiar situation which has been created for the court. The court doesn't normally interfere in these matters, but where independent fundamental rights are concerned, the Supreme Court has always interfered and should interfere in these matters because they are the backbone of our democracy.
Right. In fact, exactly as you said, that we have seen in the past that the centre has actually denied these allegations. They have submitted so in the affidavit as well. But the Supreme Court essentially saying that the centre's response on this matter has been vague, which is the reason why they had been compelled to actually form this expert committee on this matter. And national security cannot be the bugbear that the judiciary shies away from by virtue of its mere mentioning. So, in fact, the Supreme Court had to say this is because the centre had in fact said that they cannot share further details on this matter in their affidavit because it is a matter of national security. There was national security concerns that the centre had cited for not sharing too many details on this.
You see, national security doesn't take away the rights of a citizen to know why his phone has been snooped. You snoop, you look into these things for different purposes. Pegasus is being inquired into the world over for abuse. And the Supreme Court is ordering ordering supervision on this matter. It is absolutely justified and correct.
Right.
Absolutely justified. You can't avoid it. If it's military software, then say it's only used for military. Then say don't.
Mr. Vasudev.
Have been taken.
Right. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Taken, isn't it? No, I said there were so many names taken of civilians and individuals whose phones have been hacked and tapped. Those people they're entitled to know why their phones were tapped.
Right. Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, joining us on this big breaking development that we are covering here on Mirror Now. Essentially, the Supreme Court has said that an expert committee will now be formed in order to look into the demands of a probe into the Pegasus reports, as had in fact been submitted in the 10 petitions that it was looking into in this matter.